Hello everyone. Today we will see the rest of the portion, that is hydrides. We are dealing with the chapter hydrogen, and we have come across with the preparation, that is the lab preparation as well as the commercial preparation of hydrogen, and also the chemical properties of hydrogen and a little very important uses of hydrogen. Correct. Now we will see the next topic, that is hydrides, and mainly hydrogen combines with almost all the elements except noble gas to form the hydrides, and the hydrides are having an oxidation number of -1. For example, if I say LiH, lithium hydride, or NaH, sodium hydride, or magnesium hydride, MgH2, in all these cases the hydrogen has got an oxidation number of -1. And also there are another hydrides like B2H6 diborane. We will study in P block element. We will study this compound B2H6. In that case also it is having a negative oxidation state. Okay. So the hydrides you can broadly classified into 3. See, first is called as ionic hydrides, or we can call it as saline hydrides or salt-like hydrides. What is it? Ionic hydrides or saline hydrides, or simply you can say salt-like hydrides. The second broad classification is covalent hydrides or molecular hydrides. And the third is metallic hydrides or non-stoichiometric hydrides. So the hydrides can be broadly classified into ionic, covalent and metallic. The same thing we have studied in the case of molecules, isn't it? Ionic molecules, covalent molecules, metallic molecules, isn't it? So in that way, hydrides can be also classified as ionic, covalent and metallic. First we will deal with the ionic hydrides. See, ionic hydrides means, from the name itself, they are stoichiometric compounds, isn't it? Stoichiometric compounds, and these compounds are formed with S block elements. So when S block elements combine with the hydrogen, you will get ionic hydrides. The S block elements in the periodic table is what? Group 1 and group 2, isn't it? So group 1 and 2, alkali and alkaline earth metals, are called as S block elements. That means highly electropositive elements, isn't it? Are highly ionic in nature. For example, if you say NaH, it will form Na plus and Cl minus, ionic. LiH, Li plus and H minus. BeH2, Be2 plus and H minus. So the compounds with hydrogen, the compounds of hydrogen with S block elements. What is S block elements? The group 1 and 2. What is the first group element? Alkaline metals. Hydrogen, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium and francium. Okay, francium being radioactivity, we are not considering it. The second group is beryllium, magnesium, calcium, strontium and barium. So ionic compounds means they are stoichiometric compounds where the hydrogen will form compounds with the mainly S block elements. Okay, so and normally highly electropositive elements. But when you talk about ionic hydrides, there are some exceptions in this case, and the exception is nothing but some hydrides will show covalent character. That is the exception. Even though we are saying that these hydrides are ionic in nature, that means they form ions, but we know in all cases there can be exceptions. So not all the hydrides in group 1 and 2 are, we can say, ionic, but there are some covalent character also there in the hydrides. For example, lithium hydride, then beryllium hydride, magnesium hydride. That means these are all lighter metal halides. If you note, this is at the first, they are the topmost of the periodic table in the group 1 and 2. So you can call it as lighter elements, correct? So these lighter metal hydrides like lithium hydride, beryllium hydride and magnesium hydride, they will show some covalent character even though we are saying about ionic hydrides. Clear? Okay. Now the second is, the characteristic is, these ionic hydrides are crystalline and non-volatile in nature. Crystalline, crystalline nature, and non-volatile means what? It is having a it will have a high MP and BP. That means non-volatile means it does not easily form vapors. That is called as non-volatile. Clear? And the third point is, or the third characteristic is, ionic hydrides are non-conducting in solid state but conduct in molten state. Now what do you mean by that? You know, in solid state, for conduction, what do you need? Conduction, either you need electrons, isn't it? Or in solution, you need ions. So in this case, you need electrons to conduct what? Electricity. So non-conducting in solid state means in solid state there are no free electrons to support that. But in molten state, the heat you given is for breaking the van der Waals force of attraction and making them as free electrons. Correct. So in this case, if you say, for example, if you say the molten state means we can say melt. Melt means molten state. If hydride is there, that is H minus is there, in that case, it will go on electrolysis, it will go to the anode and it will form as hydrogen and it liberates 2 electrons. See? So since this is going into anode, the H minus is going into anode, which means that anode is positive. So always the minus will go to positive. That means this is a hydride. Okay. So this is a hydride. So their melts conducts electricity, or molten state conducts electricity, and on electrolysis it liberates hydrogen at where? At anode, which confirms that the existence of H minus ion or hydride ion. Clear? Okay. Now again, the fourth characteristic is these hydrides or the ionic hydrides reacts violently with water to produce hydrogen gas. Okay, so this sodium hydride, for example, sodium hydride plus water will give you sodium hydroxide plus hydrogen gas. Okay, next, here also there is one exception. See, we said that these hydrides are mainly formed in the first group and the second group of the periodic table, which we collectively called as S-block elements, right? But in this exception, the lithium hydride, which is not so very reactive, we can say it is unreactive, but that lithium hydride can be used to synthesize other hydrides. See, these are the exceptions, isn't it? So, these lithium hydrides are unreactive or not so reactive, but it is useful in making other hydrides. For example, see, lithium hydride plus aluminium chloride. Actually, you can say aluminium chloride is AlCl3, but in ionic it acts as a dimer. Okay, a dimer means it's twice. That is combination of that. Association happens. Okay, so bridging happens, that you will study in P block. So Al2Cl6. So that lithium hydride on treatment with Al2Cl6 will give you lithium aluminium hydride. It is a very important commercial product. This is used as a reducing agent, very powerful reducing agent. Okay, not a simple reducing agent. It is a powerful reducing agent or a strong reducing agent. So you can prepare the lithium aluminium hydride from the lithium hydride on treating with aluminium chloride. At the same time, you see lithium hydride plus diborane. You will study this. Okay, this will be a new name for you, but this is diborane. That is BH3 is borane and its dimer is diborane, B2H6. In the same way AlCl3. Okay, so in this there is a three sender 2 electron bond that you will study clearly in P block. Leave it. Okay, so this forms again an industrial useful element, compound, that is lithium borohydrate, which is again a powerful reducing agent. So this is about what? This is about the ionic hydrides. So is it clear? So ionic hydrides are compounds mainly formed with S-block elements which are highly electropositive in nature. Exceptions are there having covalent character. They are crystalline and non-volatile. It is non-conducting in solid state but conduct in molten state, which is having an experimental mode. That is the melt, or in the molten state the hydride ion will go to anode, which says that, or which confirms that the existence of H minus ion. It reacts violently with water to produce water. The exception is the lithium hydride, which is unreactive, but it is very useful for producing more other hydrides, useful hydrides. So is it clear? Okay. Now we move on to the second category, that is covalent or molecular hydrides. So this is ionic hydrides. Now we will see covalent hydrides. Okay, now in covalent hydrides, see in covalent hydrides mainly when we talk about ionic hydrides, those hydrogen having compounds with S block elements, right? So here in the covalent hydrides or molecular hydrides, the hydrides are formed with the P block elements. P block elements means the group from 13 to 17, isn't it? So example is from 14, 13 it is okay, but 14 carbon. Carbon hydride is methane, nitrogen hydride is ammonia, oxygen's hydride is water, and the fluorine, that is a halogen's hydride is HF. So with all these groups from 14, 15, 16, 17, all these groups, it can form the molecular hydrides, correct? So it can form the molecular hydrides, correct? So no issues with it, right? So it can form molecular hydrides with the P block elements. That is the main difference between the ionic hydrides as well as the covalent. Ionic means with S block element and covalent hydride means with the P block elements. Clear? Now, depending on the relative number of electrons and bonds in a Lewis structure. You know Lewis structure, right? You know how to write a Lewis structure also. We have studied in chemical bonding, isn't it? How to write a Lewis structure by treating the valence electrons. So, the relative number of electrons and bonds in Lewis structure, you can broadly classify these covalent hydrides into three. What are they? They are electron deficient hydride, okay, electron deficient hydride, then electron precise hydride and electron rich hydride. See, three types of hydride. Electron deficient, from the name itself you know there is some deficiency here in electron. Electron precise, you will say precise means accurate, electron accurate hydride, and electron rich, that is having excess electron hydrides. So these are the classification based on the relative number of electrons and bonds in a Lewis structure. Okay. Now we will deal with one by one. What is electron deficient hydride? You know, as the name itself, it shows that there is a deficiency in electron. And that comes under the 13th group. Correct. So, which group the electron deficient hydride? It comes in the 13th group. 13th group means boron, isn't it? Boron, then aluminium, gallium, indium and thallium. So, in that groups, we can mainly see the electron deficient hydride. Boron means, I said, that is BH3, borane. And its dimer is diborane. So this diborane or borane is an electron deficient hydride. Correct. So that means it has got very few electrons for writing the conventional Lewis structure BH3. That is why we say BH3 is a Lewis acid, because BH3 can combine with the NH3 to form what? BH3 NH3 compound. You have studied this in the octet theory. Okay, so that is the first hydride, that is electron deficient hydride, that is comes under the group 13. Okay, second is electron precise hydride. How much electron is needed for that bonding? That all electrons are satisfied, that is precision. Precision means accurate. So electron precise hydride means accurate number of hydrogen is there for making hydride. For example, CH4. You know CH4 is a tetrahedral geometry, correct? So all the elements of group 14, that is what? Carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, lead. All these elements form the what type of hydride? Electron precise hydride. That means the correct number. How much number of electrons are required for it? That much number of electrons are there in group 14 to make its hydrides. Like CH4, if I take carbon, that is CH4. Silicon, SiH4, carbon, silicon, germanium, GeH4, then tin, SbH4 and lead, PbH4. So, like this you can have the hydrides. Mainly in group 14, the electron precise hydride makes. Clear? Now moving on to the third one, the last one is electron rich hydride. From the name itself, you know, in all these hydrides there is electron rich. That is, there is more donor electrons or electron sufficiency is there in this hydrides. For example, NH3. If you say NH3, you know, nitrogen, in this nitrogen there is one lone pair of electrons. Water, there are 2 lone pair of electrons in oxygen. So mainly from group 15 to 17. 15 to 17 means nitrogen family, oxygen family and fluorine family. The electron rich hydrides can happen. Correct. So HF, again an example. Okay. So these are the 3 different types of hydrides depending on the relative number of electrons and bonds in Lewis structure. So is it clear? Now we will move on to the third thing, that is what? Metallic hydrides. See, metallic hydrides. Okay. Now when we say that the electron rich hydrides are made between the 15th and 17th group, which is more electron negative in nature, isn't it? The electron negative nature means 15th is nitrogen, 16th is oxygen and 17th is fluorine. The hydrogen combines with it forming hydrogen bonds, isn't it? Hydrogen bonds. So hydrogen bond is formed between these molecules, which can lead to the association of molecules. Just keep in mind. Okay. Correct. Now we will see the third type, that is metallic hydrides. See, the metallic hydrides are mainly seen by the hydrogen combination with the D block and the F block elements. So we have seen all the 4 blocks. S block you can say for ionic hydrides. P block you can say it for a covalent or molecular hydrides, and D block and F block you call for it as a metallic hydride. Okay. So but there are exceptions, like group 7, 8 and 9 do not form these type of metallic hydrides. Okay. So metals of group 7, 8 and 9, that means we are talking about the transition metals, that is the D block elements. Okay. We are talking about the D block elements. In that the 7th, 8th and the 9th group does not form hydrides. That metals does not form hydrides. Clear? And also when you go for 6th group, that is chromium group, you will study in lanthanides and actinides next year. So that in group 6 also only chromium forms this chromium hydride. So that is this exceptions. Okay. When you if you talk about the physical properties of these hydrides, like metallic hydrides, you can say that these hydrides will conduct heat and electricity, though not so efficient as their parent metal. Which means parent metal means if you take chromium hydride, this chromium hydride conduct heat and electricity, but much less than what chromium itself will do, or it conducts electricity. Clear? Okay. Now one more important thing is the metallic hydrides are non-stoichiometric in nature. Now what do you mean by non-stoichiometric? Non-stoichiometric means there is no fixed formula for that. See, in the case of lanthanum hydride, lanthanum comes under F block. Okay, F block. So lanthanides, you call it as lanthanides. So this is lanthanum hydrides. Then in this, see, it is 2.8. That is non-stoichiometry. If it was stoichiometry, the integer will come as 1, 2, 3, etc. So if a fraction comes or a decimal comes, you can say it is a non-stoichiometric compound. So lanthanum hydride is non-stoichiometric, which comes under the metallic hydride. Or ytterbium hydride, YB. YB is lanthanides. Lanthanides means F block. Ytterbium, YB. That also, see, the hydrogen is 2.58. So these are non-stoichiometric in nature. So unlike our ionic hydrides, which are always what? Stoichiometric, this metallic hydrides, that is, this metallic hydrides can also, you can say another name as non-stoichiometric or interstitial hydrides. You can also call it as interstitial hydrides. Okay, so this is called as interstitial hydrides. Metallic hydrides are also called as interstitial hydrides or non-stoichiometric hydrides. Is it clear? Okay. Now, even though it was earlier it was thought that in all these metallic hydrides, the hydrogen will occupy the interspace in this metal lattice. You know, if you're talking about metals, there are metal lattices. Okay, that you will study in the next year. Very, very, very thoroughly you will study in solid state. So when you comes to a metallic metals, there are lattice. Lattice means crystal structures are there. Now, what earlier it was thought as the hydrogen, what you're talking about in hydrides, the hydrogen will occupy the vacant space or the interstitial space. Interstitial means between the two atoms there is space, which we call it as voids. In that space, the hydrogen will go and sit there. It was believed that like that. But then it was, and then if that happens, if the hydrogen gets into the interstitial space of that metallic lattice, there will be a distortion in the geometry, right? Okay, it will be a distortion, but there is not much change in the lattice. Even though there is a slight distortion by interstitial hydrides, there is not much change in the geometry. But in recent studies, it was shown that almost all the hydrides, there are some exceptions like nickel, palladium, etc. Other than that, the interstitial hydrides have got a different geometry from the parent thing. For example, if it is a lanthanum hydride, the lanthanum, it is having a crystal geometry. Correct. In that geometry, if the hydrogen is go and get into the space between these atoms, this geometry of this lanthanum hydride will be entirely different from the geometry of the lanthanum, the individual metal. Okay, or it will be different from the parent metal. Clear? So that is about the interstitial hydrides. Why we call the metallic hydrides as interstitial hydrides. So is it clear? Okay. Now again, one more property of hydrogen is adsorption. What is it? Adsorption. Now what is adsorption? AD. See, that not absorption. It is adsorption. Now adsorption means nothing but absorption on the surface. Right? Adsorption means nothing but absorption. You know what is absorption, right? Absorptions on surface is called as adsorption. Not into the bulk or not into the lattice. Only at the surface absorption takes place. Correct. So that is called as adsorption. So when you talk about absorption of hydrogen, the property, okay, or you can, even though you won't use this absorption is also okay with this. But in higher classes, you will study about the adsorption. I think here you are only concerned with the absorption of hydrogen. Absorption of hydrogen is mainly used as a catalyst or the catalytic property. Okay, now the hydrogen is absorbed, which increases the catalytic property. That is hydrogenation reactions for the preparation of so much compounds. Okay, so these are the main thing regarding the metallic hydrides. So is it clear? Okay, so very easy. That it is divided, that is the covalent or the molecular hydrides are divided into mainly three, that is ionic, then covalent and metallic. Then covalent again has got three classification: electron deficient hydride, electron precise hydride and electron rich hydride. Metallic hydrides, which are mainly from D block and F block, which are non-stoichiometric in nature, whereas ionic or saline hydrides are stoichiometric in nature. And the main thing is, it is also called as interstitial hydrides because the hydrogen will go and sit in the interspace between these metals, which will distort the geometry of this entire metal. Okay, so we can say the metallic hydride will have an entirely different geometry from the parent metal. Okay, so these are all the things with which comes under the covalent hydrides, metallic hydrides. Correct. Okay. Now we will see another topic which is related to hydrogen is, you all know, water. See, we all know without water you cannot survive, isn't it? So water is very important, and the chemistry of water is also as important as that. Now we will write this molecular formula of water is H2O, right? H2O, and you are all familiar with this, isn't it? It's a colorless or odorless, tasteless liquid, correct? Without which we cannot survive. And we know the living organism, a major part of all the living organisms is made up of water, because our human body is itself now 65% is water. Somebody will say 75% of water, but on a normal case we can say 65% of water is there in a human body, which constitute at least a major part, right? And in plants, you see, plants, it is 95% of it is water. See how it goes, the water, the speciality of water. Okay, so so that is about the water. That is human body, it acquires the 65% of the water, and plants, it acquires the 95% of its water. Okay, and we all know that it is a very, very crucial compound, isn't it, for the survival of all living beings. Correct. If something want to live, it needs water. Water, air, etc. So water plays a very crucial role in our survivability. Okay, and also water is a very good solvent. Okay, when we talk about the chemical reactions of water, it's a very good solvent. Almost all the, particularly the ionic compounds are soluble in water. Not organic compounds, but normally ionic compounds will always soluble in water. Okay, because due to its high dielectric constant, we will come into that. And we also know that the distribution of water in the earth's surface is not uniform. Somewhere it is very high, somewhere it is very low. It's okay. Now coming to the physical properties of water one by one. Water means what? Hydrogen, right? Hydrogen, H, O and H. Now what happens is, this is a very colorless, tasteless liquid, and the unusual property of this water, you can say water in solid state, that is ice, and liquid state is water itself. Now, in these two cases, or in these two states, or in the condensed phases, the unusual property, that means when the water is in solid state and when the water is in liquid state, these are the condensed phase. This property of this water in this liquid and solid state is due to the presence of extensive hydrogen bonding. I want to write the term extensive. Extensive means a huge, a very, very large number of hydrogen bonding. That is meaning of extensive. So this water can exist as solid and liquid due to the property of the extensive hydrogen bonding. Is it clear? So the unusual property of water in the solid as well as in the liquid phase is due to the presence of extensive hydrogen bonding in the water molecules. Okay, so how you know? See, hydrogen bonding is what? It has got two. Oxygen is more electronegative, so it will have two lone pair. So this will come and attack with the other hydrogen. See, H, O, H. So this is the hydrogen bond. If I say like this, if I bond it, this is hydrogen. So it goes on like all the water molecules, it will have hydrogen bond throughout. Okay. Now since it is having an extensive or excessive hydrogen bonding, this leads to the so many physical properties. Since it has got a very, very huge hydrogen bonding structure, because water molecules can link into a millions of other water molecules through hydrogen bonding, because hydrogen is bonded to a more electronegative element. That is what the definition of hydrogen bonding itself says, isn't it? So it reacts, it forms bonding. It forms a it is not very weak, but it is a strong bond. Hydrogen bond is very, it's not very strong, but it is strong when compared to the weak van der Waals force, but it is not very strong when compared to ionic or electrostatic bond. Correct. So due to this extensive hydrogen bonding, what will happen? Due to this extensive hydrogen bonding, what happens? It has got high freezing point, high melting point, and also high heat of vaporization and high heat of fusion. See? So all these high values are due to this hydrogen bonding. So physical property I just wrote like that: high freezing point, melting point, heat of vaporization and heat of fusion. Again, due to this extensive hydrogen bonding, it has got a high specific heat, thermal conductivity, then surface tension, dielectric constant, then dipole moment and surface tension. Okay, surface tension it is mentioned there. It's okay. So due to this hydrogen bonding, the water has got so many peculiar characteristics, isn't it? So that are all very high in values. Even though if you say about specific heat or thermal conductivity or surface tension, in water the values are very, very high. Is it clear? Okay. So, and all these properties, see, all these properties of water, what we have said, play a key role in the biosphere. See, all these properties like specific heat or surface tension, whatever we mentioned, these properties of water will play a key role in our biosphere. Okay. Now, two more things to be validate here is, one is since the high heat of vaporization and heat capacity, it is very, very crucial for the moderate climate and body temperature of living beings. So, since this water having high heat of vaporization and the heat capacity, these two criteria are responsible for the moderation of this climate, because our climate is not too very hot and too very cold, isn't it? So that is mainly due to the high heat of vaporization and heat capacity of water in our atmosphere, okay, or in our earth, and the body temperature of living beings. Correct. And the last is water act as a very good, excellent solvent. The water act as, because normally all the ionic compounds are soluble in water. So that is called as, it's an excellent solvent. Okay, so these are all the physical properties of water. Hope you understood. It is very, very simple, isn't it? And you know, it is also an excellent solvent. If you say water in biologically, you can say this is a solvent for transportation of ions and molecules, which is required for the plants and animal metabolism. This water only is carrying that, right? These ions and whatever it is needed, the molecules required for this metabolism for the plants and animals. This water is responsible for that. Okay. And also, due to the heavy hydrogen bonding or excessive hydrogen bonding in water with the polar molecules means having charged molecules, even the covalent compounds like alcohol and carbohydrates are soluble in water or dissolve in water. Okay, so the main criteria is the hydrogen bonding. So all these criteria characteristics occurs from this one criteria, that is the hydrogen bonding. Correct. Okay. So this much is about the water and introduction. Now, having studied this water, we have to go to the next is the structure of water. And we have studied very, very detailed the structure of water, the shape in the chemical bonding, isn't it? Molecular chemical bonding. In that chapter you have studied. Now, what is the structure? It is a bent molecule, isn't it? It's a bent molecule. Correct? Now, in the gaseous phase, the water is a bent molecule. See, we have written there are two lone pair of electrons here. Then the bond angle between this is what? 104.5 degree due to the lone pair repulsion greater than the lone pair bond pair repulsion, which is greater than the bond pair repulsion. Are you remembering the VSEPR theory? Hope you are remembering that. So according to this, the bond angle is down, or it is decreased from 109 degree to 104.5 degree. And the bond length is 95.7 picometer. Okay. Now when we say water, it's a polar molecule, right? Why we say it's a polar molecule? Because see, this is electron negative, so it carries a delta negative. Since it is 2 hydrogen with delta positive and delta positive, this will carry a 2 delta negative charge. Correct. So this is a polar molecule. Correct. Now you know the solid phase of water is ice. Correct. The solid phase of ice, you can say, or you will write it as H2O solid is ice. Correct. H2O liquid is water and H2O gas is in the vapor state or in the steam. Clear? Okay. Now you know the crystalline form of water is ice. Correct. And at atmospheric pressure, that is at standard temperature and pressure, or at atmospheric pressure STP or 1 atmospheric pressure, this ice crystallizes in the hexagonal form. So at normal temperature and pressure, this ice, that is a solid form of water, is crystallizes in an hexagonal form. What is hexagonal form? Like this. See, you have studied benzene, right? Last year, 10th standard. So, this is the hexagonal structure. Okay, so this type of hexagonal structure, it will crystallizes out. But that is at the normal temperature, that is 1 atmos. Okay, and 273 Kelvin. So, sorry, 25 degrees Celsius. That is the normal temperature and pressure. Now, at very low temperature, the ice condenses to form a cubic form. Correct. So, at normal temperature and pressure, the ice will crystallizes in a hexagonal form, whereas at low temperature, it goes form a cubic. And we know what is the peculiarity of ice in the solid? The density. The density of ice, must be is less than that of water. Correct. Density of ice is less than that of water. That is why we can say that ice cubes float on water. Okay. So this is all about the structure of water. Okay. So next we will go on to the structure of ice. Till now we have studied about the structure of water. Now we will see the structure of ice. You know, structure of ice means it has got a structure of ice. Okay, next we will see the structure of ice. Now coming to the structure of ice, it has got a three-dimensional structure. That is a three-dimensional hydrogen bonded structure. What is it? A three-dimensional hydrogen bonded structure. So please refer to the figure in the textbook, that is figure 9.2. Okay, it's an hexagonal array. That means when you examine like in X-ray through this the structure of ice, you can see you can see water in the solid state is ice. So each oxygen atom is surrounded tetrahedrally. Okay, each oxygen atom is surrounded tetrahedrally by 4 hydrogen atoms. See, if you can refer to that structure we have given in the ice in the textbook, the structure of ice, you will notice that each oxygen atom is surrounded by 4 hydrogen atoms. Okay, and the hydrogen bonding in the ice will give you an open type structure with very wide holes, and these holes can hold some other molecules of appropriate size. Okay, so this is the structure of ice. That is a three-dimensional structure with hydrogen bonded structure in which each oxygen atom is tetrahedrally bonded to the 4 other hydrogen atoms. Okay. So this is for today. The next section we will see the chemical properties of water. So till then, thank you.